Okay, it is 6:30, so I'm going to call to order a meeting of the Oregon School District Board of Education. It is Monday, July 22nd, 2024, and we are in the OSD Innovation Center at Oregon High School. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Bijak.
Here.
Dr. Bush.
Here.
Ms. Garrison.
Yep.
Dr. Lakuta.
Here.
Mr. Pankratz.
Present.
Ms. Wright.
Here.
Ms. Flanagan.
Present. Board does have a quorum. Next is proof of notice of the meeting, so I think Ms. Heights has that, so we're going to show that so everybody knows that this meeting has been duly noticed. Sorry. There, okay, we are good there. All right, so move on to approval of the agenda. We do have 4 action items tonight, and then the board will go in closed session. The board may or may not go back into open session after that closed session. So I will entertain a motion to approve this agenda.
So moved.
Is there a second? Any discussion on the agenda? All right, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Mr. Pankratz.
Yes.
Ms. Garrison.
Yes.
Ms. Bijak.
Yes.
Dr. Bush.
Yes.
Dr. Lakuta.
Yes.
Ms. Wright.
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Moving on to the consent calendar. We have the normal items on the consent calendar, and then I will read the following donations. $8,000 from One Community Bank as a scoreboard sponsorship. A stander for use by special education students who are in wheelchairs from Beth Murphy. $6,516.62 from the Friends of Oregon School District for the Avid Tutors and then the Be a Champion Mentor Program, and then $100 for the Admin Scholarship from Brad Ashmore. All right, we also do have a field trip on here, so I will entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I will move to approve the consent calendar with the exception of items 1 and 2, which need additional discussion.
Okay, so we have a motion to remove 1 and 2. Is there a second? All right, any discussion on the consent calendar? Okay, hearing none, Katie, could you please call the roll since we removed 2 items?
Dr. Lakuta.
Yes.
Ms. Wright.
Yes.
Ms. Bijak.
Yes.
Dr. Bush.
Yes.
Ms. Garrison.
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz.
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan.
Yes, motion carries 7-0, and I did fail to mention that we did have a $250,000, $250 from the American Red Cross, so that was a scholarship that was in there as well, so I wanted to thank them for that. Okay, moving on to B, information items. Is there anyone here for public comment? Was there anyone signed up? Okay, is there anyone here for public comment? All right, last time. Anyone here for public comment? Okay, moving on to OEA report, and I believe Mr. Nathan Johnson is here, so he can come up to the microphone, and then Nathan, the floor is yours.
My name is Nathan Johnson. I'm here tonight as a teacher at the high school and as my role as a member of the Oregon Education Association Board of Directors. With the next year's revisions to the staff handbook on tonight's agenda, I just wanted to make a brief statement in relation to our process of getting here. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge the district for sitting down at the same table and engaging in genuine dialogue with the staff and teachers of this district. And in particular, I want to thank Ms. Jonan, as well as the rest of the district staff, that they genuinely hear teacher voice in our district. And on that front, I'd like to share an experience I had from the previous year. During the previous school year, I went to support teachers in another school district where the district wasn't even sitting down and dialoguing with teachers, and they wouldn't listen to teacher voice. And during their public comment time, I was able to share my experiences in Oregon, where teacher voice is valued and sincerely heard. Treating teachers as professional partners in continually working to make the best schools for our students, it really does create an environment conducive to learning. And most of all, that doesn't cost a thing to show respect and listen. And I really want to say tonight that we so appreciate the Oregon School District for engaging in the challenging work of hearing all voices and reaching consensus that makes our district a destination district for staff, for families, and most of all for students.
Thank you, Nathan. Okay, moving on to B3, which is student report. Again, we do not have students here because it's the summer, so we will move on to C, action items. And the first up is the 24-25 food service prices. So I will turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So in response to our last meeting, when the board really wanted some additional information related to setting food prices for next year, we went back and we did some work to supply some more information. There is an appendix to agenda item C1 that I'd like you to take a look at in your packet, because I want to walk through the thinking process and the data that was collected that is really supportive of the 15-cent recommendation. So, as many of you already know, we've had a significant deficit in the Oregon School Nutrition Program for 2 years in a row. In the 22-23 school district, it was $190,000, and in 23-24, it was $185,000. And there are three primary reasons, and this is critical for everybody listening to know. It's rising food prices along with supply chain costs, so increased costs. The federal subsidies that really led to us having a healthy surplus from 2020 through 2022, those are dwindling. As a matter of fact, there's really one left. It's a supply chain supplementation or subsidy that we don't know if it'll even be there next year, and I think it was $100,000 this year. So that's a pretty big question mark in the budget. And then the operation of an additional food production kitchen, because when we built Forest Edge, we built it with a food production kitchen. We are operating it as such, but we also know that our growth, while slow and steady and quite favorable when compared to our neighbors, is still not the giant leap that we were necessarily expecting by the year 2030. And food production kitchens are simply more costly to run. More personnel, more equipment, etc. So a combination of all of these things have led to a deficit in the last 2 years. So to decrease the deficit, we have three potential strategies, right? And that is increase the number of meals served, increase the price of school meals, or decrease the cost of production through efficiencies. And I believe, and so does Mr. Weiland, that our potential deficiency is large enough where it's really going to be all three things that need to happen in concert with one another. So the first, I'll have you take a look at, the first strategy is increase the number of meals served. And remember, everything is an estimate. I'm taking some of last year's numbers and trying to make projections, assuming that all things would stay the same. So, and I think also you had received information earlier regarding where we are at with compared to some of our neighboring districts. And what I showed you was a slightly different calculation. It was the percentage of students who participate in the program. What you see on the page in front of you is the number of meals. So slightly different, but I definitely think they can be used to compare one to another. And so when I took a look at the 23-24 OSD food prices and the 23-24 USDA reimbursement rates, because we actually do get some reimbursement for fully paid meals also. So you would add in what the family pays plus the OSD reimbursement, and the level at which that happens depends on whether or not students are eligible for free or reduced meals or they pay their meals in full. So you take a look at that, you calculate, the calculation or the formula is down below. And then using that formula and the numbers that came from DPI regarding our participation in 23-24, you can see that we could potentially, based on what our neighbors have done with the participation of students eligible for free and reduced lunch, we could potentially, if we really pushed, have a 10% increase in the number of meals served related to students eligible for free and reduced meals. Now, you'll note that's not necessarily a significant amount for that 10%, right? It only gets us to, I don't know, what is that? Just under $17,000. But and that would make us the highest number, we'd have the highest number of participants who are eligible, the highest percentage of students who are eligible in the area. So it's an ambitious goal to increase by 10%. It's also an ambitious goal to increase by 7%. Now, we did 4% in total this year, which was really good. So that's why I believe we can do it with intention. But it would also make us, I think we're the second highest participants in our meal program for students who pay full price. We already have the second highest rate. So a 7% increase, once again, an audacious goal, but I think a really worthy one. And that would bring us significantly more. So in total, if we met our 10% goal and our 7% goal, we would be able to save, I think it's just south of $52,000. Those numbers are a little more of that will be below. The second strategy, of course, would be increasing in the price of school meals. And once again, it's all an estimate, but basically a 15-cent increase to school meal prices would be $44,000 of increased revenue. So it's about $15,000 for every 5 cents. Easy enough. Now, we also plan to save about $30,000 in operational efficiencies by moving the food bar lines at RCI and Forest Edge to the main lines, really. So it's a reduction of one line, but the choices will still be there. It'll just be, they just won't have a single line devoted specifically to that food option. So if you take all of that together, before I get to how close we would be, I really want to show you what the projected deficit would be, because we made some probably inaccurate assumptions when we were trying to think our way through it last time. So if you take a look at our starting point, we'll say last year's deficit, if everything stayed the same, would be $184,000, or 85, excuse me. However, it wouldn't stay the same, because if food participation was the same, the cost of food will still go up. So if CPI right now is just under 3%, so I took 3% of what we spent in food in total last year, which is about $1 million. And so we ended up with just under $30,000 of increased costs. So then we would add the just under 30,000 to the 185, and we end up with just under 215. Everybody see that? Now, the $130,000 that was part of the OMS equipment replacement last year, that was actually one-time, very expensive replacement. However, our average over the course of the last 3 years is actually $93,000. So in 2 years ahead of this, we had $64,000 worth of repairs or replacements. The following year was 68, and then last year it was 146, but 130 of that was for that specific OMS repair. So in order to really get a handle on how that would impact next year's deficit, what we did is we took a look at the average for 3 years in a row, and we subtracted the difference between the average and last year's really high cost, right? Last year was 146, took minus the average from that, and we get to 52,696. So we subtracted that from 214,000. Just to say, yes, we're definitely going to have at least the average amount, or we could have the average amount of repairs, but probably not that super high year of 146. So that brings us in total to the projected deficit of $161 $988 or $162, right? For all the intents and purposes. So then, let me get this next piece. So the next page, what would be the strategies we would use to reduce this debt? So you see these 3 boxes there. If we meet our participation goals, 10%, a 10% increase in the number of meals served for students eligible or for free and reduced meals, and a 7% increase in the number of meals served for students who pay full price, we would reduce our deficit by $53,847. So now we're down to 108, okay, approximately. If we increase the price of school meals by 15 cents, which remember last year you also increased by 15 cents, it didn't diminish the participation, so we haven't hit that threshold yet where it makes people stop their willingness or end their willingness to purchase school lunch. So that's one of the rationales for sticking with 15 cents again. Another that I didn't include, but I have shared in other methods previously, is that we have quite a few families who are not eligible for free and reduced lunch, but are still eligible for assistance from the pantry. So there's a lot of families who are living in that gray area who are paying this money, and it's a real hardship. Now, thankfully, our food pantry is helping a lot of those families out to the tune of $1,800 to $1,900 a month. So I just am very cautious when I think about increasing food prices of how it impacts those families in particular. So if we do 15-cent increase, we're down to a projected deficit of $64,000. If we have the $30,000 of savings in the food production efficiencies, that brings us down to $34,000. The following year, we do plan to close one production kitchen. Closing one production kitchen is a savings of $70,000. So if we're able to do that on year 2, we meet the goals set forth this year, we'll definitely be able to be out of our deficit in 2 years' time. So that's the rationale for the selection of 15 cents as a price increase. And of course, we always have the option of going higher than that and working to reduce the deficit within 1 year. That's always an option, but the information I just shared is why we decided to stay with 15 cents.
All right, let's open the floor for any clarifying questions based on the new data from Dr. Bergstrom. Go ahead, Mary.
Leslie, how does the increase in school meal price impact those eligible for reduced cost lunches?
It does not increase. Sorry about that. They're capped at I think they pay 40 cents a meal, so it does not impact them.
Okay, and so really, we're talking about the benefit to the Oregon Area Food Pantry
Yes.
by keeping it at 15%.
Well, and there's other families too. I think
Sure.
once we start getting close to $4, and we're very close to $4, I think there's also a lot of families, particularly if you talk to somebody who's got a middle school boy, freshman boy, sophomore boy, they like to eat doubles. And when we're talking about $4 each meal, $8 to feed your child lunch, it starts to become a lot more attractive for them to go home or for you to pack.
Sure, okay. And then one question in the appendix on page 2 on that informational slide, I don't quite understand why we're subtracting the $52,696.
So the average cost is $93,000, but last year we arrived at the deficit of $184 with a really significant replacement repair budget of $146,000. That's unlikely to be average, right? That's much higher. So if we assume the average repair and replacement cost, it would be $52,000 less than what led to the $185,000 deficit last year.
Thank you.
Heather, I think you were next.
Couple questions on the closing the food bar line, one at RCI and one at FES. I'm not super familiar with that, which is fine. I guess my question is, what is the outcome on service times or crowded lunchrooms or not, getting through in the shortened lunch period?
Very good question. And some of the things that have happened in the last few years that have really reduced students' wait time overall are now we don't have all of our fifth grade students, for example, in a line at the same time. Their recesses are flipped. So half are out at recess and half are eating. So the really long lines when I was an RCI principal that were common simply aren't anymore. And they've also opened up so that a la carte can be purchased at the same time so kids aren't waiting in line twice the way they used to before also. So they've done some things to reduce the lines, and therefore they think that this is still going to fit within our time window really well.
Okay, and then my follow-up question is, and maybe this is a little nebulous for this actual action item, but you had mentioned the production kitchen potential plan. What does that do? What does that do to fresh food or preparation of food?
That was a concern I shared also. And so what they have been doing is they've been keeping some of the steaming, or what they would plan to do is they would keep the steamers at all of the kitchens so that things like vegetables could be steamed on site regardless of where the rest of the food was produced, so that you don't have soggy vegetables for kids.
Go ahead, Caleb.
So I was looking at, when you look at the three strategies, 2 and 3 are things that the district can more or less control, right? We can raise the price of food, we can reduce costs. Number 1 is one that kind of is out of, not entirely, but it's a little less under district control. So I was curious if we have, or there are examples of what's been done so far to increase participation, and if there are ideas for how to, because it's a pretty ambitious goal, do we have ideas for how to increase participation? Because I was looking, and if we only have a 5% growth, that increases the deficit by $20,000 or something like that. So that was my question, is what's been done or what ideas are out there that we can use?
Well, I called DPI on this because I wanted to better understand. I was wanting to clarify some questions I had about the data itself. And then I also spoke to them about what is feasible regarding an increase in participation. And what I was told was that there were a lot of materials available, things that have been successful elsewhere that we could look at and lean on related to how to market our high quality program for families. I think in the past, we also saw some really great participation when we had some fun things like the around the world food and those types of fun aspects. But that might be participation for events. What we're looking for is continued participation. And so I think we'll really be relying on the DPI tools that are provided and put them within the context of Oregon and what might appeal to our families. We also need to do have some conversations with families, particularly those who are eligible for free or reduced meals and are not taking advantage of the free or reduced meals. What else could we do that would make those families feel like this was a good option for them? So it's going to be using the DPI tools and really going to our families and asking good questions in a personalized way, and then using that information to inform decisions.
Okay, Leslie.
First of all, thank you for coming back to us with more information. I appreciate that. I have a question that kind of pulls off of Heather's question about line times. You addressed RCI. I'm not 100% certain in my knowledge, and I probably don't know, that it works the exact same way at FES.
Thank you. It probably doesn't, but I'll also say that the numbers at FES are small enough where that food lines have not been a problem, so they're not anticipating that it will be. And I'll also say the bar lines are the least popular lines, so they had the shortest line anyway. So if you infuse that group of students into the regular line, you're not going to see a dramatic difference.
Okay, so then my next question is having to do with, you talked about the one government one-time fund that is still going on. When that comes to an end, well, first of all, if that comes to an end, will we get any kind of notification like months in advance, or is that like yeah, you're done and that's it? And if that comes to an end this year, we're not accounting for that 100,000 in these numbers, right? Correct?
That is correct. And no, we won't get a big anticipation, or we won't get notified far in advance. It'll just not be there. And nobody at DPI could really tell me any more than that either. So here's one thing that I do know is, first of all of these things are estimates. And it could very well be that we have an extraordinary low replacement and repair bill right this year, where the average is 93. We might only need 15,000. There's a lot of float in these numbers. So even if that went away, I still feel we're going to make some pretty good progress on our goals, but that will definitely mean that we'll have to increase participation the following year or take another look at prices.
Okay, last thing. You also mentioned the food pantry is helping those students that don't quite make the free and reduced. And you mentioned like $1,900 a month, or is that for one family? No, that's more than one family.
Yeah, that is all of the families who participate in the program. So it's $1,800 and $1,900 a month that the food pantry spends to support the families in that category, that little slice.
Okay, so with that, I'm just curious, have any of the administrators or the food service personnel taken a look at what it might look like if we did like a stepped kind of cost for those families that could pay more, and then the families that are just barely out of that free and reduced paying just a step above that reduced price?
Thank you for asking that, because Judge Pollock and I, who's the head of the food pantry, she and I had that discussion. I spoke to Andy right now. He said he doesn't think that DPI allows tiered pricing, and also how to operationalize something like that. I'm not quite sure how it could happen. There might be more that we could do, but I also thought we should probably get ourselves out of the deficit and then start thinking about how we can better support some families who need the support.
Go ahead, Troy.
Thank you, Dr. Bergstrom, for walking us through. I guess the only question that I have is kind of right at the end. When we're projecting a deficit of about 34,000 after this upcoming school year. What are you thinking for the following year? Because we would have likely kind of exhausted all of the strategies. Are we just thinking we would then reevaluate the price again next year?
Well, we have two things for the following year. The first is the production kitchen reduction, which could be up to 70,000. And then next, what I'm hoping is if that comes into play and we meet our participation goals, then we may be able to just look at a price increase that covers inflation. So if it's 3% again, maybe we'd be able to just do 10 cents or something like that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, any additional questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the 2024-2025 food service prices laid out in item C1.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? Go ahead, Heather.
I struggle with this because I understand us not wanting to raise prices too much, but as Caleb mentioned, I'm curious if we'll hit those aggressive goals, and that's a big chunk of the deficit reduction. And as I think about earlier you'd mentioned that a 5% increase is about $15,000 of a reduction. And so part of me is just playing, do we do 20? Understanding that that has an impact on the community and certainly on those that are in that slice that we're talking about. It's hard for me to look at that we're going into deficit still just by serving students and staff lunch, and especially with this aggressive increase. So it's not that I don't support 15%, but I don't like it. How's that for discussion?
You're more than welcome to introduce an amendment if you'd like.
Is it friendly when I change the price?
No.
No. What do I have to do then?
That is a non-friendly, no, you want to amend it to not be 15 cents, you'd have to amend it to be a different dollar amount.
Great. So I'd like to amend the motion to be a 20-cent increase.
All right, is there a second to that motion?
I would second.
All right, any discussion on that motion? So it would change from 15 cents to 20 cents is what we're discussing. Go ahead, Mary.
So I suspect that you're right, Heather. I think we're not going to meet that aggressive target. The goals of 10% increase in free and reduced and the 7% increase in the regular price of lunches are higher than all surrounding schools. It is a very aggressive target, but there are also so many moving parts and pieces that I struggle to put the burden on the families at this point without knowing more about what that flux is going to turn out to be, which is why I'm accepting the 15 cents for this year and then reevaluate after next year. So those are my thoughts.
Go ahead, Anna.
I do agree with that. I found myself struggling with the same thing. It's 34,000. If it's 5 cents, it's another 15, then we could add 10 cents and really close the gap. But if we really want to try and increase participation, that's fighting against that particular opportunity. So if I guess I would like to see us accept a little bit of a larger deficit with a 15-cent increase to give us the best chance of potentially increasing that participation, because that's going to help us, that's going to continue to help us year after year if we can increase that participation. And if we start to see that, then we can, that's going to be the best way for us to actually become less of a deficit to serve the meals. So it's really, I feel like a fine line and a balance. And I think I'm still, in my mind, comfortable with the 15 cent, just to not make it more difficult for us to meet these increased participation goals.
Okay, go ahead, Caleb.
I just have a quick, I guess, kind of clarifying question. If we could, and I know Mr. Weiland's not here, but if I remember correctly, the 15 cent number for a price increase comes from a recommendation, right? Is that, if I remember correctly, that it's that we're not pulling the number out of nowhere, that it's kind of like the max that they kind of recommend that you increase prices in a year?
It's a little over the max recommendation that they have, but they also said that they believed our weighted value should be $3.85, and we're considerably lower than weighted. And what that means is you add in what they pay for elementary school lunch, middle school lunch, high school lunch, and it should be $3.85, and it's definitely less than that. So we do have room to move up. Absolutely, we do. You just wonder at what point will it impact participation. And we're already going to be, I think, the third highest lunch in the area. So.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie's going to call the roll, and that is on Heather's amendment.
Ms. Garrison? Yes. Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
No.
Dr. Bush?
No.
Dr. Lakuta?
No.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
No. All right, so back to the original motion of 15-cent increase. Any further discussion on that?
I just have a quick question. Dr. Bergerson, you just said something about understanding that they're not wanting to recommend more than 15 cents. However, we have room to grow, but we're the third highest.
Yeah.
How is that?
Okay, you got me. So DPI said that our weighted average could be 385. That would make us significantly more expensive than anybody other than the one school district that doesn't participate in the USDA.
If we were 385.
If we
not
were a
right now.
385
There it is.
average.
Thanks. Okay.
So I'll just put my 2 cents in. The reason I voted no, because I think it's very important that we have an active food service program, that we're actually promoting it and it's not passive. And so that's why I would really like to see the staff dig in and really share with families the benefit of our program. I'm not sure that families know the price and how inexpensive it is compared to food that they pay that they would bring. And so I think this is, I think, a message that we would really like the team to dig in and sell this program. So that's why I voted no. All right, we were back to the original motion, which is 15 cents. Any further discussion? All right, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
No.
Mr. Pankratz?
No.
Ms. Wright?
No.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 4-3. Okay, we have food service prices for 24-25. Good discussion, and thank you for the additional information. I think it was very helpful. All right, moving on to policies 165 and 166, Title IX, that came from policy, so I will turn that over to Mary.
Thank you. Yeah, we did have a policy meeting last Tuesday, I think, in which we discussed policy 165 and 166. The goal was to combine them both into policy 165, and I'm going to turn it over to Gina to discuss that.
Thank you, Dr. Lakuta. And so we are, as Dr. Lakuta said, currently we have 165 that's students and 166 that's employees. And so with the new regulations, it made more sense to merge them into one policy. Additionally, if, as you may know, this has been in the news that there's a lot of questions around Title IX. There's been some lawsuits filed that judges in other jurisdictions, not Wisconsin, have ordered that the regulations not go into effect. And so one of the way that this policy is written is very similar, I would say, to some of our other policies where things are ever changing, is that the policy itself that the policy committee recommended is short, and then the rest are guidelines. Not only because really 99% of the new regulations are operational, but that also gives the district flexibility to change the guidelines as we learn more, either through the U.S. Department of Education or through the court litigation. So just wanted to mention that. Otherwise, this policy does comply with the new Title IX regulations that go into effect August 1st of 2024. And so I'm just really grateful to the policy committee for getting on this so quickly. It's been discussed for 2 meetings, and I know other districts are really working hard to get something into effect by August 1st. So I just appreciate the hard work and time, and happy to answer any questions that you have. I know almost everyone was at one of the policy meetings where it was discussed, so I'm happy to take questions.
All right, any clarifying questions for Ms. Jonan? Okay, I'll go back to Mary to put a motion on the floor.
So the recommendation from the policy committee is to retire policy 166 with the incorporation of that information into policy 165. So I move to approve policy 165 as presented in the board packet.
All right, that's a recommendation from the policy committee, so it does not need a second, so the floor is open for discussion. Is there any discussion? Okay. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Wright? Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. Thank you, policy, and thank you, Gina, for all that work. It's a lot of detail and a lot of really important things. All right, moving on to action item 3, which is the 2024-2025 employee handbook. So I will turn that back over to Mary because that came from policy as well.
So, just in the way of background, excuse me, I appreciate the conversations that Gina has with the OEA to discuss the employee handbook every summer. We know that our educators have been really dealing with challenging times the last few years. The first step that we as a board have taken was to move to get a referendum that our community passed, and we are very grateful, so that we have been able to bring the compensation packages in line with our surrounding communities. So that was the first part. The second step really was last fall, where there was a professional sustainability task force that was engaged. And the very first recommendation out of that was to have more flexible leave options. That was one of the most important things to our educators. So the biggest component of discussion for the employee handbook was around this. There were several other more minor items, but this is being presented as a purple because it's not just a policy change, it does impact the budget. So it does have budget implications. The request is they currently have 9 sick days a year, and 2 personal leave days a year. The request was to shift that to 8 sick days and 3 personal leave days, with a budget implication of 35,000. Yes, excellent. And you know, the policy discussion was very lively. We talked through it, from many different angles. There is a potential for this to be successful. There is also a potential for this to be unsuccessful because we do not have 100% substitute rate. And so increasing the number of personal leave days that our employees are allowed to take therein may very well increase the strain on the other educators. So I think ultimately the policy felt it was worth implementing for 1 year. We have one-time funds that can cover it, and it would need to be then reevaluated next year to see whether it was successful or unsuccessful in helping the educators, from a mental health perspective and from a reduction in stress.
Ms. Jonan, do you want to go ahead and explain too the second piece of this proposal with the purple in terms of the position where that impacts the board as well?
Certainly, and that was an excellent summary, Dr. Lakuta. The only piece that I would add is that the recommendation is seeking to move 1 sick day from the sick leave bucket to the personal leave bucket for school year staff. So it would apply to support staff as well, not to the employees that have vacation leave, with the rationale being that they would have vacation, whereas school year staff do not have vacation. And that 35,000 estimate is looking at all of those employees as well. And so a lot of the discussion centered around that the conversation in the task force on professional sustainability is one of the themes that did come out was teachers feeling that pressure to sub for other teachers. And pressure is probably not the right word. It's just, it's their coworkers. They want to help. They want to support them. Things happen that are unexpected. And so, but when teachers are giving up their prep time to cover another teacher's class, then that's work time that is lost for them. And so one of the things that came out in the recommendation was to address the substitute teacher shortage, as well as special education paraprofessionals, because we have positions that we weren't able to fill, and so that puts a lot of stress on our case managers as well. And in looking at other districts that have higher fill rates than we do, and I'm really proud of the change in our fill rates, We were at, I was just looking at the data. So for the 22-23 school year, we were at 80% fill rate, and for this past school year, we jumped to 90%, which is a really big jump with increased absences. And so proud of that, but just in looking at what are other districts doing, one of the successful strategies is to have an HR person to focus on that retention and recruitment, particularly of substitute teachers and special education paraprofessionals. And so the board did approve that subject to funding, which I really won't know until September because we're not done hiring yet, which is the biggest part of our budget. And so in thinking about if we do make that change to personal leave, that based on the historical data is that people will take additional days, or at least we have to plan for that. So that's going to create additional vacancies. And so the hope is that if we make this change, but then also approve the hiring of that person, then that person can start focusing on those recruitment efforts. And if we can increase our substitute pool, and if we can fill those paraprofessional positions, then hopefully, even though teachers will have more opportunity to take leave, we'll have more people to fill in, and there won't be a strain on the system. So we would be looking, our recommendation is to make that change in the employee handbook. That has been very important request priority from our staff, and then also partner that with filling the HR position to focus on recruitment and retention to alleviate that strain of having to cover more absences.
Was there any other, did you want to kind of gloss over any other minor changes that were in the employee handbook besides those two, that one?
Certainly, and so as Dr. Lakota mentioned, there's smaller changes. One of, in line with the staffing, is that right now we have a March 1st deadline for folks who may be on a child leave to tell us if they're returning, or we give an early incentive thank you for folks telling us that they're going to retire, because the earlier that we know we have a vacancy, the quicker that we can fill it. And so, at this time of the summer, it's really hard to convince educators to leave their district and come to us, even though we are a destination district, because they feel committed to their current district. And we appreciate that. We hope our teachers are committed to us. And so we're looking to move up that deadline to February 1st. And I have found that people know their plans by then, so I don't see that being an imposition on anyone. And it's not as though you can't retire after that date. It's just that's when we give the early thank you payment. So that's one of the changes. There's a change in the holidays, and also just some clarification. Doesn't change our practice of you need to work the day before and the day after or be on paid leave in order to get holiday pay. That's been that way for 20 years. It's just the language is a little bit confusing, so just wanted to clear that up. And I'm just looking real quickly. And then the other thing, just for clarification, is you'll see a lot of changes in the sick and personal leave language. And that's really just a cleanup, that there's a lot of categories in the handbook. And sometimes when we're going to hire people or they're looking, they don't know which classification they fall into. So looking to collapse all those categories. So instead of having admin assistants, paraprofessional, food service, we'd like to go to 4 categories. So full year staff, professional, and support staff, and then school year staff, professional and support staff. I think that'll help people navigate which leaves they fall under, and it'll just make the handbook more succinct. So not intending to be a change of anyone's allocation or benefits, other than the change that Dr. Lakota explained.
Okay. Mary, I'll put it back to you if you want to put a motion on the floor.
Yeah, recommendation from policy is to approve the employee handbook for 24-25 as included in the board package.
Okay. Since it comes from policy, it does not need a second, so I will open the floor up for discussion.
May I?
Sure. Dr. Bergstrom, go ahead.
Thank you. I just think it's important to note that while pursuing the well-being of our teachers is worthy in and of itself, our highest pursuit is really the well-being of our kids. And I think our students are better off when our teachers feel like they're leading a more balanced life, when they feel as if when they really need something, their district is responsive to them. I just think that this overall leads to our teachers feeling as if this is the place they want to come or they want to stay. And we know the benefit of highly trained teachers who've been here many years on our students. So even though this is very teacher-centric, it's always in service of our real mission, which is making good things happen for our students, academically and social emotionally.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Gina.
I just wanted to have a point of order to be clear, is the policy committee approved the changes to the handbook. And so the administrator recommendation is to approve the changes to the handbook with the addition of the HR position.
Okay, so we do need a second to that motion.
I would second.
I think Leslie beat you to it, sorry. All right, we have a motion and a second, so thank you for that point of order. We are back in discussion on the floor. Go ahead, Anna.
I guess I would start by saying that, you know, I'm very supportive of this, of the concept of adding an additional day, or I guess making a swap between the sick and the personal days. I will say that was something that came up frequently during our task force meetings, and part of that was, you know, I think there were two things that we were hearing, and that is that a lot of the teachers that were part of that sustainability task force said, sometimes we don't even, like, we feel guilty even using sick time because we know the strain it places on our coworkers and our friends and the people in our building. And so I guess the reason I bring that up is that we have educators in our buildings that care about one another, and I hope are at a point where they're using this time in a way that it can help them feel good about the work that they're doing, improve their mental health, help them feel a better balance between the work that they're doing, but also being cognizant of the fact that it does have an impact in the schools. And so I wanted to bring that up. Secondly, I would say that, you know, there was talk about, well, couldn't all of the sick leave be just paid time off? And I think we all recognize that's just not realistic given, again, the substitute fill rates and the strains that we have. And that may then also have a detrimental impact on student learning, because when the teachers themselves are not in the classrooms, that has an impact. And so I do feel like this is a really great way to listen to that feedback, make some positive change, and allow for that to be an outcome from a lot of really excellent work that happened in that task force. So I'm really supportive of this. I do have a question, and that is, right now the employee handbook is written that it's a 1-year commitment for the $35,000. So I want to make sure that that's messaged very clearly to folks, and that we have some very good measurables on how we're going to define that as success and whether or not we're going to be able to continue that. I'm thinking about things like tracking data on the number of substitutes that we needed, the fill rate that we were able to achieve, a comparison of how much sick time versus PTO time was used by the staff that this applies to, and then the budget impact, right? So I think we really need to go into this knowing that we're tracking this data and we're looking at it to make future decisions about the potential of that continuing beyond 1 year. With that said, you know, we're making this motion now to include an additional HR staff member, which is another outcome of the Professional Sustainability Task Force, but that's not necessarily a 1-year commitment. So I'm a little bit hesitant about that piece, only because we don't know where we are budgetarily. I know we've got it written in here, we'll use one-time funds for the upcoming year, and then we'll need to budget appropriately for that in future years. But that's my only one concern at this point, is that the employee handbook gives us a buyout, if you will, if it doesn't work or we can't afford it financially, or, you know, whatever, we decide that it's just not in the best interest. So I don't know if there's any thoughts or comments on making that decision to move forward with the HR staff member now versus waiting till we have a little bit more data where we are budgetarily.
Dr. Bergstrom or Gina, do you want to answer that?
I can start, and then you can go forward. So the plan originally, as we know, was to look at the end of the hiring season and see if there's money left over in our operational budget to fund it. And it's highly likely that it is. However, we really want to get a jump start on the substitute recruitment and the paraprofessional recruitment prior to the beginning of the year, or at least very close to the beginning, because we all understand that the hiring process can be long and complicated. So it could be quite a while if we waited until September to know if we had the money in the operational budget. However, we would be able to, with funds that are still reallocated from ESSER, meaning we put Dr. Anderson's position in the budget for 2 years in a row, and then utilized ESSER funds to pay for it, thus saving some of that funding. We could fund the position, even if we couldn't fit it in the operational budget, for up to 3 years. So we could make a decision now, feel confident on 3 years of funding, but actually I think my confidence level is pretty high that it can fit into the operational budget post the end of this hiring season. Because interestingly, we have hired some teachers fresh from college, and that's kind of lovely, and it has a great impact on a lot of things within our system, but they certainly are less of a financial impact than somebody with 25 years of experience.
Gina, was there anything you wanted to add before? Okay, I think Troy, you were next, and then you, Caleb.
Yeah, my question was just answered, but I support this proposal. I mean, $35,000. This has a significant positive impact on our staff. I mean, I know it's only one additional day per year, but it is a nice benefit, and we're moving in a good direction here. So I don't. At a cost of $35,000, give or take, whatever that works out to be. But I don't think that's a tall order. But I do want to emphasize what Anna said. I think we really want to track the metrics on this and be able to revisit this next summer and see how it turned out.
Caleb.
So I think it's an easy follow-up question to Anna's question about the 3-year position. I think there's a 0 missing in the third bullet point. I'm guessing that it's 100,000 per year, not 10,000 per year. Right, because unless I was like, well, is it like a percentage appointment? So that was my first. So I think that's just a clarifying point that it's $100,000 per year. So it's a 3-year, 300,000, whatever it is. The other more substantive, meaty question I had was, and I don't really fully understand this myself, and I'm a state employee, but there's something with sick leave and banking sick leave over your career when it comes to retirement and those kinds of things. And my only thought was, does this change have any kind of impact on any of those benefits potentially, or is there any kind of retirement impact? That was my only thought. And I don't really understand how it works, so that was my question.
So that's a great question. Our benefits work differently than the state, and there's different laws that surround all of that. So for us, there's no impact from a teacher's retirement in terms of sick leave payout, because how this district does it, and it's been that way far before me, is that when people retire, we pay out sick leave in a ratio depending on how many years of service they've had with us. So if you have 10 years of service or more, it's a ratio of 1-5. And so what we do is, right now, teachers have their sick leave allocation, and then they have, if you're full-time, the 2 days of personal leave. You can accumulate up to 40 hours of personal leave or 5 days. And if you don't use it, it goes into your sick leave. So the difference between sick leave and personal leave is what you can use it for. So sick leave has much more limitation in our handbook versus a personal leave. But at the end of the day, at retirement, we treat them as the same bucket. So we add them together and then pay them out in that ratio. So there is an incentive to save your sick leave if you plan to retire from us. We also pay out sick leave after 10 years, even if you resign from us and don't retire. And we're one of the only districts I know of that still does that, because we want to give that incentive to save those days. I would also say you have to be very lucky, right, in order to save days. I mean, some of it is a personal choice, but I would say when I have teachers that run out of their leave, it's really because they have an illness or their children have an illness and they don't have someone else to stay home with them. Or there's a family medical leave and they've had to use those days to care for aging parents or a spouse. And so there's an incentive to save them. And I'd also say that for some people, this life doesn't give them a choice to save them. So this does not impact their retirement benefit.
All right, Leslie.
So I just need some clarification on the third bullet point. It says that the money would come from what the ESSER money that would have been used for Dr. Anderson's position. How did we ended up switching that? Because initially hers was supposed to be from ESSER, correct?
It was, but we put the position into the budget also. So we used ESSER money for the first 2 years of Dr. Anderson, but that freed up money within the one-time money within the operational budget. So that's the one-time money that we would use for this.
Go ahead, Heather.
A lot of what I was going to ask or say has been answered or said. I just wanted to add my support for the transition of 1 day of sick to personal and for this position. My only other thought is I'll bring Tim LeBrun here is, we continue to talk about finding money somewhere, which is great. Or, we're over X and Y. And so I just wanted to circle back, especially to the lunch conversation, because there's an opportunity of 15,000, which is just shy of half of the 35,000 that we need. And I'm not saying that anybody isn't looking at it holistically, but we really as a district have to continue to think about the need overall, and that it isn't food services and staffing and facilities and et cetera, and really think about what is give and take, or how we're going to, continue to be a destination district, and come from a place of, of gratitude for community support and adding things, but also understanding that there's limited budgetary, there's limited ways to do that. So just wanted to say that out loud for reference, but thanks for the work on the policy committee.
Great, thank you. I appreciate Mary using the adjective lively. I think I was the lively part of that meeting, so I appreciate that. But for me, I am on the record completely supportive of the change from taking a sick day to a personal day. My lively part was it makes absolute no sense to me that we would not also do it in concert with the position so that it is absolutely successful. We have to give this pilot a chance to be successful, and the key to that success is a position who somebody is dedicated to finding subs, making sure we have enough paras, because that goes hand in hand with employee satisfaction. So I hope the OEA and I hope everybody that's listening understands that in order for us to be successful here, this is a package deal for me. They have to go hand in hand, and that's the way I view it. So I appreciate the lively part of that discussion. So anyway, any other discussion as part of this motion that partly comes from policy but had a second because there was added to it? Go ahead, Gina.
The only thing that I just want to make clear, because I did have the typo, and thank you, Dr. Bush, is that that number is everything. That's not the salary for that position. That when I look at the market, like that's WRS, that's FICA, that's benefits. And so just wanted to make that clear to everyone.
And the $35,000 is also an estimate because it's based on subs and staff taking other staff, those sorts of things too. So
Yes.
This gives people a ballpark. So everybody's comments are very well taken, and that was a really good policy committee meeting. So I appreciate the sustainability task force and everybody working together, and what Nathan mentioned too is there's a lot of feedback from the staff as well. So this is what happens when people can work together and disagree and come to a consensus and talk things through to get to a better place. So here we are. Katie, can you please call the roll?
Dr. Lakuta. So first I would love to say it was an excellent and lively discussion, and I agree with Krista that it is a package deal and it should be a package deal. So that said, yes.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak?
Yes.
Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Garrison?
Yes.
Mr. Pankratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes. Motion carries 7-0. Back to Mrs. Jonan.
I just wanted to say thank you to the board and Mr. Johnson for the very kind comments tonight. And I just felt like I needed to echo that because I appreciate Nate and Angela Seeger and his committee in working very hard this summer on talking about the handbook. And I just wanted to say that I'm very thankful to the board because our collaboration is a direct result of your direction to me as well as Dr. Bergstrom. And so I'm just really grateful for all of you and for the OEA and for Dr. Bergstrom's leadership to have a district because as we're hiring this summer, it really matters. And I just wanted to say thank you.
All right, thanks. Okay, moving on to our last action item, which is the co-curricular code of conduct. So I'll turn that over to Dr. Bergstrom, and then I think we will have our athletic director here, so Brittany Spencer-Grant will come up to the mic as well. So Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. Brittany plans to just share a few things that are changes to the co-curricular code for the upcoming school year that are really points of clarification, not changes in practice. So she can answer any questions you might have on what those are. She'll describe them right now.
All right, I won't ask you for any money tonight in honor of Mr. Weiland's absence. Just as you peek at the code of conduct, there's really only 3 additions that have been made in all our language clarifications. They start on page 9. One of the misperceptions that was out there is that if my student wants to self-refer for a violation, you're going to launch an investigation, and now they're going to have to kind of tell on their friends. And so that sentence just kind of clarifies we're not going to launch any sort of investigation if a student chooses to self-refer within the parameters that we have within the code. It just kind of allows them to accept the responsibility. They're still going to kind of follow the code in terms of the consequences, but we're not out to kind of catch kids, get kids, anything like that. So it's just an opportunity to kind of clarify that they have that option, and we won't be pressing them for details at that point. And then the other 2 pieces come on the top of page 10. The first one is a copy and paste from the WI rules, just that if a suspension results in a fraction of a contest or a game, that the number gets rounded up. And my assumption is that's an equity thing between sports. You can't sit out 2.2 cross-country meets and join in, 3/4 of a mile through a race or anything like that. So I think that's where that rounding comes from. And then the last part is just to clarify that for suspensions to be counted as served, students have to be present in school and otherwise eligible to be competing in that contest. So that was just kind of language that we wanted to clarify so that, there aren't any confusing pieces. And this is actually language that I added to code letters when those do go out to families too. This language is in that as well for further clarification. And that's the only updates I have.
Okay, any clarifying questions? Go ahead, Leslie.
So I'm looking at Appendix C, this thing here.
Yes.
When it talks about self-referral, it shows that underneath the first violation, but not under the second or third. Is that not an option under the other?
Correct.
Any other violation? So
It's
only
a one-time
the first
only.
time. Okay, thank you very much.
I guess I have one question based on something you said, and I'm back to 2040107, which is a self-referral, and I guess it's a question for Gina. So I understand that completing a self-referral does not require students to share details, but you said that we would not launch an investigation. So let's say we have a kid that says something that's pretty egregious, or it has to do with dealing drugs, or something that puts more of our students at harm. Is that the case that we would not ask the student to, but it doesn't mean that we would not necessarily launch an investigation, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I just want to be
maybe
careful.
reported that we'll have a duty to investigate, but as I understand it, wouldn't change what suspension the student would be serving, but there are things we would have a legal duty to investigate.
Okay, so I just want to be careful that we're not saying we wouldn't launch an investigation, because we probably would. So we're just saying we are not requiring them to share further details, but we may do our own due diligence, correct?
Yes, I mean, as I understand it, and Brittany, please correct me, is that in order to have that reduction in the penalty, that we wouldn't require kids to say, okay, who's every kid at the party, right? But if there was a significant, let's say a student gets assaulted, and that, will be doing our investigation, and we would ask, to let us know what witnesses were there, who else was there, et cetera. So I look at this as just strictly the penalty portion, if that's the right word, for the suspension, independent of any other investigation that we might do.
Do we need to have that sort of language within this code of conduct that clarifies that?
From my legal lens, I would say no, but if you all find it confusing, we want our parents and our families to understand this. So
I don't think the language is confusing. What confused me is what you said. And so as long as we are clear about what we're saying when we refer to this, and that we don't talk about any subsequent action the district may take that's separate from asking the kid to share details, I'm good. But if the minute we start talking about this, we say the district will not launch an investigation, then I have a problem. So if you're good, I'm good.
yes, and we can work on that as
Okay.
we go through for the code meeting to be clear about what it means and what it doesn't mean. Because yes, I do want students to understand that there are times we just have to ask questions, and we really hope that they'll work with us and families will to keep other students safe.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Okay, I will entertain a motion to approve the 24-25 Code of Conduct. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. Katie, could you please call the roll?
Ms. Wright? Yes. Dr. Bush?
Yes.
Ms. Bijak? Yes. Ms. Garrison? Yes. Dr. Lakuta? Yes. Mr. Pinkratz?
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan?
Yes, motion carries 7-0. You have a code of conduct. You are good to go. All right, thank you. Okay, moving into E, discussion items, committee reports. First is vision steering, and that is Heather.
Well, thanks. Our next meeting is August 12th, before the board meeting.
Then policy committee, back to Mary.
We will be trying to get a meeting on the calendar in early August.
Okay. Thank you guys for being able leaders of our committees, and thank you for getting those rolling. Moving on to F, information items, vision and strategic planning, teaching and learning update, and superintendent's report. Those are all Dr. Bergstrom.
Thank you. So for visioning and strategic planning, I'm really appreciative of the work the board is doing in both policy and vision. That is a really large part of the visioning and strategic planning framework. I think some important topics are being discussed, and we're creating some exciting possibilities for the future. And of course, all of those things that we are discussing align with the 6 priorities that the board has for the years 2022 through 2025. Now, I'm going to move to the teaching and learning update because Mr. Tanner is going to share some really relevant information related to our incoming seniors and some of the new Wisconsin programs they are eligible for.
Hello. This is, I'm going to preface by saying it's a bit of a confusing scenario, and so therefore I have structured it like a lesson in which we have some success criteria, otherwise known as learning targets. So here's my goal, is that as a result of listening to me for the next 5 minutes, you'll be able to name 2 new college admissions programs that apply to the class of 2025. So that is this year's Rising Juniors. And that you'll be able to describe at least 2 major distinctions between the programs so that you can answer any questions from parents or community members. So that's your challenge. Actually, that's my challenge. So the 2 programs are listed at the top of the slide, Wisconsin Guarantee and Direct Admit. So let's move on to the first one. So this is one of your answers, Wisconsin Guarantee. This is also called the Wisconsin 2023 Act 95. So this was done by the legislature. And this is, we think the intention was to keep the top talent in the state. So what this does is it says that starting with this year's, I guess the juniors who just, the juniors who just ended their junior year. So the class of 2025, the seniors for this next year, the top 5% of every graduating high school class in the state is guaranteed admission to all the UW schools. As you know, we used to call it the UW system, and now it's called the Universities of Wisconsin. So adding to the confusion, they rebranded themselves in the midst of all this. But this is great because it guarantees that students will be admitted to certain UW schools when they apply. So the top 5% of each graduating class is guaranteed admission to everywhere. The top 10% of each graduating class is guaranteed admission to all the UW schools except UW-Madison. Now, if you're not in that, you can still get in to UW-Madison or any of the schools following the just traditional you apply for college route, which is they're calling traditional application. So nothing with that process has changed. What I'm telling you about tonight are just two sort of additional ways to do this. So for the Wisconsin guarantee, it basically says if you're in the top, you are guaranteed admission when you apply. Students still do have to apply to the schools that they want to attend, so they would fill out the application process, and they have to do this during the early decision window, which starts August 29th and ends November 1st. But then they basically submit that. And one of the things that we had to do as a district is we had to place a new indicator on their transcript that says that they are in the top 5% of the class or the top 10% of the class. As you probably know, our district does not report class rank, but we do, in this case, put that you're in the top 5 or top 10%. That way, when a student applies, they submit their transcript and it says, hey, you're in the top 5%. Congratulations, you're in. It's basically a way to streamline that for UW system admissions. So last week, the letters were sent to the qualifying Oregon High School class of 2025 students who qualified under this. So they got letters in the mail saying you are in the, the letter just said you're in the top 5% or top 10%. Here's what that means with this new law that went into effect, and we enclosed a copy of their transcript so that they know which they are in. Important to know that this decision, the law states that it has to be calculated based on their GPA at the end of their junior year. So it doesn't mean that it's a free ride. It means like they can just blow off the whole senior year. We know senioritis. So there are things in the law that say like, yeah, you can't just slack off or do anything dumb. But basically it's, hey, if you're on track, you are admitted. So that's the Wisconsin guarantee. Yeah, good.
So if it's early decision, does that mean that they're then committed to going? Just out of curiosity.
It doesn't mean that they're committed to going. It means that they are guaranteed that they will be accepted, and then they can make the decision about whether to accept that early decision offer.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
So you're not committed. Yeah. So the other program, take your notes, this is the answer also to number 1, is called Direct Admit or Direct Admissions. They call it Direct Admit in most of their terminology. So this is a completely separate thing. This was not done by the legislature. This was instituted by the UW systems, the Universities of Wisconsin. And this is an interesting one because this is an optional program where students who meet certain course and GPA requirements are directly admitted to UW schools, and they don't even need to apply. Now, the one thing they do have to do, which this year's junior class had the opportunity to do earlier, is to opt into the program. So we surveyed, sent a survey out to the whole junior class. At the time, it was the junior class because this was back in like February. They said, hey, here's this program. Would you like to opt in? Here's what you'd be, here's the information that would be sent to UW. So about 154 students or their parents and guardians, actually parents and guardians because none of our juniors, I think, were 18, opted into this and said, oh, it's okay for you to directly send the information about my child to the UW system for the purposes of Direct Admit. So the Direct Admit program applies to sort of a different set of schools. It applies to all the UW system schools except for Eau Claire, La Crosse, and Madison. So this doesn't really apply to those 3 at all. So the admitted students, the information was sent to them, to the UW system as a whole, and then they break down the criteria, and they will be informed starting July 29th and going on for it's like a 2-week window where students are just basically sent letters that say, hey, congratulations, you've been admitted to, and lists the schools. So all the other UW system schools. Students also are not obligated because they may have the opportunity, they may be admitted to like 5 different schools. And then they can choose whether or not they will accept that offer of admission. So that's direct admit. Go ahead.
Sorry, with the direct admit, it says who meet course and GPA requirements for future generations of students. Will they know those course and GPA requirements up front if this is something they want to be able to do?
They know the course requirements. The GPA, which I will tell you in a minute, the GPA requirements they do not know, and those are actually, we were told to keep those confidential. So there are different schools that have different GPA requirements, but they are not to be disclosed to people. The course requirements are essentially our graduation requirements and 3 credits of college level math. And there's a big definition of what college level math includes. If you take the regular Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, sort of standard course sequence, that counts. And there is a method for vetting other math programs and courses that we have that we've worked through so that students who are taking other math courses that may be named slightly differently than other things can count. So most students will have gotten those 3 credits of college level math. Yep. This is my abbreviated comparison. So if you're trying to do success indicator number 2, you can take a look here. Because, for example, like eligibility for the Wisconsin Guarantee, or Act 95, is based purely on class rank and purely by unweighted GPA. So that's, fortunately, we had no ties this year. But the way that breaks it down is we have 16 students in the class of 2025 who are in the top 5%, 32 in the top 10%. Whereas direct admit, it's based on some high school courses and GPA. And then students, for the Wisconsin Guarantee, they don't get an option whether to participate or not. We just report to the state, or we just report on the transcripts if you're in the top 5% or top 10%, and we're required by law to inform them of this opportunity and that they're in it. So Wisconsin Guarantee, though, they still have to apply, like the regular sort of admissions form. Direct admit, they have to opt in. So if you didn't do that form in February that says, yes, please include me, then their information was not sent on to UW Direct Admit. So anyway, there's that fun application part. Yes.
So how are the student rankings determined? Because if memory serves, like this past year, we had, I don't know, it seems to me at least 32 4.0 students in their senior year. I would have to admit it. I would have to imagine there would be at least that many in the junior year.
So
not more.
This year, I think the 60 you were thinking of is actually our freshman class. At least I don't know about the senior year, but I do know that Jim made a point of noticing that in our freshmen this year, we have like 61 students who have a 4.0.
I feel like there was in the superintendent's report, there was a slide that had a picture of people filling the stage with 4.0s in there. No?
No, I think it was a picture from Badger Conference Honors Night. And while we certainly had a large number of 4.0s, I think there was another school that filled the stage in a really outrageous way.
Yeah, so some schools base it on everybody that's got a 4.0. We do it based on percentage, and it's determined by AP classes, and that's how we determine our top 10%, correct?
So it's weighted, essentially.
Well, for Badger Honors, we have different criteria. We add in things other than just GPA, like you said. So the type of classes, AP, honors, that sort of thing, which is different because the law for Act 95 says you must use only unweighted GPA. So, yeah, So
I'm just getting, Mr. Pliner is watching from home, and I believe last year we had 12 4.0s in our senior class.
okay, yeah, and for this year's juniors we had 15. So
Thank you for the clarification.
You're
Thanks,
welcome.
Jim.
yeah, thanks, Jim. Caleb.
We're not yelling into the void. I saw nowhere in there anything with college admissions tests, ACTs, or and so I would probably know. I'll know more about this in a couple of years when my oldest is getting ready to do this. So does this just like throw ACT just out the window? I mean, I don't even know what the current situation is with all the UW schools and how they handle ACT scores or other college admission SAT. So what is the situation with ACT, SAT, those kinds of things?
Yeah. So these do not rely on that at all. And so for participation in either one of these, that's not a factor. Now, if you go the traditional route, which is still there, you are still expected to take the ACT, UW, Wisconsin, most Wisconsin colleges use the ACT. You can do the SAT if you want. So those you would still do the traditional application process, which includes things like ACT scores, a profile of your classes indicating advanced levels, AP classes, a student essay, a list of extracurricular, a list of community service. So that's all in the traditional the traditional application, which is still in place. So this is separate from that. And so while that traditional method is still available to everybody, and I should say this is only for in-state students too. So anybody coming from outside would still have to do the traditional method. So those other factors are still in place, but just not through these programs. There is more information if you would like them. A more comprehensive comparison chart, which also lists a third column, which is the traditional application process, is available at that third link. That was probably one of the most helpful things as we were trying to figure out what was going on when both of these measures were passed within like a month of each other, and both applied to this year. So if you're interested, that third link is quite helpful. And now let's revisit tonight's learning targets. So questions for you. What are the names of 2 new UW admissions programs which apply to the class of 2025?
And you have to buzz in with your speaker
Yes, you do
on.
have to buzz in with your speaker. Dee, 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 dee.
Direct
Yes,
admit and Act
Wisconsin
95.
guarantee.
Wisconsin guarantee.
very good. Okay. I don't even know. Oh, yeah, see, and I was doing Jeopardy music, but okay. So, and then what? This is the harder one. Oh yeah. What are some differences between the programs? Can anybody name one difference between them? Anna?
Wisconsin guarantee, you still have to apply.
Yes, very good. That's a great difference. Any others? Correct. You do not get in that way. So anyway, thank you very much. This is just an informational thing that some people we have been peppered with questions, especially at the high school. And so we thought you might too, and so you might appreciate knowing a little bit more about it. So feel free to talk to me or Mr. Pliner if you have any additional questions. Thanks.
And this is for the board members in the room that still have children in school. 3 of us have entered into empty nesterhood. It's a very sad conversation for us. Thank you, John. That was super helpful to give us the background information on those programs. And thank you for all your work on that, because those programs create work as well for us, but great opportunities for our kids. Okay, superintendent report.
Excellent. This is very focused on our amazing summer semester. So as you can see from the pictures, it's going strong, and we're really fortunate to have such great staff members working together to make this program a success. And during summer semester, we have classroom teachers, bus and lunch helpers, school nurses, school nutrition professionals, attendance professionals, and so much more. So it really does take a lot of people to make summer semester hum, and we're really grateful for all of that participation, including those of our interns. And this is really only just a fraction of the number of interns that we have working. So this morning, as it was the first day of the second session, one of my jobs was to greet buses, and as they'd come off the bus, I would tell them, if you're not sure where to go, look for a green shirt. And I would just say it over and over and over, because the kids are everywhere in their green shirts and doing a great job helping our youngest learners. With classes such as ABC Jamboree, they explore the alphabet through books, song, and movement, and they practice identifying letters, singing songs, playing games, generally having fun. We also have primary life science. These are students in kindergarten through 2nd grade who are in primary life science class, enjoying spending time outside exploring scientific concepts in a hands-on way. So you can see in this lesson, they're observing the structure and behavior of creatures in the outside world. So they all have these cute little bug catchers. And of course, the bugs go back. And then so many STEAM classes. This is so much fun for the kids. You can tell just by how enthusiastic they look. So these are students in our Maker Cart STEAM Unplugged class. They participate in these hands-on learning activities that connect all of the portions of STEAM, right? Science, technology, art, music. So some examples of their activities are developing their own game, building a Scribblebot, making cars and airplanes that move without electricity, all kinds of things. It's been really popular for our 2nd to 4th grade learners. And then this is diamond painting. Students in our summer semester diamond painting class enjoy engaging in creative and calming activities with their fine motor skills. So as you can see, they're placing teeny tiny little gemstones onto the material to create a larger picture. So that takes a lot of concentration and the type of unassisted eyesight that really only young people have. And outdoor games, boy, has this one been popular for a very long time. Classic favorites to new challenges. You can tell there's a lot of exciting things happening there. Then we have movement and mindfulness. They learn strategies related to mindfulness like yoga, rock painting, glitter jars, all kinds of self-regulation strategies. This one's scrapboarding and scrapbooking and card making. So they get projects that they can work on all period and take home, which I think is really nice for the students to be able to take home a project right away. And this one's new and really cool. It's called FitLit. It's been a really big hit. The experience is designed to pique student engagement by merging fitness and literacy. So each week the class focuses on a specific sport, and they strengthen their literacy skills and comprehension skills by exploring that sport. And then they apply what they've learned in the other part of the class, which is playing the game. So it's a way to, engage a lot of kids that might not otherwise enjoy the class quite as much, making a connection to something physical. Excuse me. Also, another really good brain development activity, practicing cursive and calligraphy. That's a summer semester class where it's really practice makes progress. You can see the sign in the corner. Puzzle it up. You can see they just look really happy there too, don't they? Puzzles, riddles, and games. So it's an accomplishment when they get to solve the riddle or put together the puzzle or, play the game. And this is Lego Logo. I have walked quite a few students to this class because it's way back in the science wing in the high school. That's hard to figure out where in the world that is when you're young. But they're busy building Lego projects with computer programming. Examples include a motorized car, a merry-go-round that plays real music, an elevator with lights and sounds, and later in this week they're going to have a battle bot competition. So they're doing some pretty cool things in that too. And then some of the oldies but goodies, right? Able to do a Let's Bake class. Homemade biscuits were this particular lesson, and you could smell them throughout the high school as they were baking. So that was a plus for those of us who weren't in the class. And then just a reminder to tune into the Oregon School District podcast. A lot of good things happening. We've got a few more things up and coming. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, moving on to G, closing, future agenda. Our next meeting is August 12th. There will be a visioning committee meeting before that meeting. And then we will move on to checkout. Mary, anything?
Nothing. Thank you.
Heather? Troy? Leslie? Caleb?
I will just very quickly say that tonight we had a couple close votes, which doesn't happen all that much. And I was thinking, and what some of other members of the board said, that often these kinds of discussions and votes and things come out of very thoughtful discussion. And sometimes, we don't always see eye to eye. We don't always agree. We often do agree. But I just think I just wanted to, again, kind of piggyback on what some others have said tonight about how the board works together, and the decisions that we make come out of very thoughtful discussion, and it's nice to be a part of it.
Great, thanks. Anna? All right, we are going to take about a 5-minute little break here, and then the board will be in closed session. Thank you, everybody.